started. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for attending this Money Guiders England event, which is all about money planning for independent living. Now, this session is going to be slightly longer than our typical session. It's going to be around 2 hours. We are going to take a break in between, so don't worry, there will be plenty of space for you to relax and to stretch your legs. I'm just going to mute some people, just so that there's no background noise. And so money planning for independent living, this session is all about helping you to have those conversations with people who are potentially moving into independent living, and to help you to understand some of the challenges that that might bring up in terms of budgeting, and to give you some practical tips for how you can move the conversation forward. So my name is Lucille Roach. I am a development worker at Quaker Social Action, and I will introduce our speakers shortly. And Quaker Social Action delivers the Money Guiders England network on behalf of the Money and Pension Service. And so Quaker Social Action is an organisation I just want to talk about briefly. It's an anti-poverty charity that's based in London, and there are lots of different projects that we have. One of those projects is the Made of Money project, who you will hear from on this session today. And their role is financial well-being for families and individuals in London and the surrounding areas as well. So the Money Guiders programme, if you've never heard of it before, and if you have heard of it before, then just please bear with me. The Money Guiders programme was created by the Money and Pension Service because they identified that there was this gap between money guidance and money advice. Whereas money advice was regulated, money guidance was not. So they did some research and they created this competency framework, which after doing lots of research, they identified represented the skills and the knowledge that money guiders should possess if they were delivering money guidance. And so that framework is something that you can use as money guiders to map your skills against. Whenever we're putting on events, we make sure that those events align to the competency framework as well, so that we can make sure that we're giving you the tools that you need to do the best job that you can do. This is a community of practice. So that basically means that this is your network. This is for you. It's for you to be able to network with other money guiders across the country. It's for you to be able to share your knowledge and guidance as well. And there are lots of different opportunities within the network. So we tend to do 2 free events every month. So all of the events that we run are free. We tend to do 2 online events every single month. And then we also do some in-person events as well. There isn't just the Money Guiders England network. We also have other networks across the UK. So there is the Scotland network, the Northern Ireland network, and the Wales network. And you are welcome to join any of those networks. You don't necessarily have to live in that region to join that network. And you can go to any of their events as well. And at the end of the event, we're going to be sharing with you details for how it is that you can join other networks as well. And on the Eventbrite, you will have noticed that we asked you a question if there were other networks you wanted to join. And if you said yes, then we will pass your details on because we've got your consent to do so. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started into the session. So this session is being recorded. So a copy of the recording will be sent to you after the event. The only thing that we won't record is the breakout rooms. We ask that if you're not speaking, if you please mute yourself, just so that we can make sure that there is no background noise that interferes with the presenter speaking or with the quality of the recording as well. There's lots of opportunities for you to connect with us beyond this event. So you can connect with us on LinkedIn, on X, and we also have a community hub. So if you have just joined the network, or if you've been part of the network for a while and there was an event that you saw and you were like, oh, that seems really interesting, I really wish that I had been at that event, the chances are we've got the recording and the resources from that event saved in the community hub. So at the end of this event, I'll give you a link so that you can access the community hub and you can look up the resources from all of our past events as well. So just briefly running you through some exciting events that we've got coming up. So on the 7th of August, we've got an event which is about powerful questions. So that's really about how to use coaching and use the powerful questions that you can get from a coaching relationship to be able to get more from your clients. We also have an event with GamCare on the 13th of August, which is about gambling awareness. And then we've got an in-person event in Bristol, which is all about planning for later life, and that is on the 1st of October. At the end of this session, we're going to be sharing with you a feedback form. And the reason that we do that is because at the end of every single one of our sessions, we always like to get feedback because we want to hear from you as to how you found the event and what events you want us to put on in the future. So that feedback really is important to us, and we will be sending you a link for that after the session. There is, as I said, the opportunity for you to be able to see all details of the upcoming events across the entire UK, and that you will get access to that so that you'll be able to see the calendar and sign up for any events which are of interest to you as well. So I'm going to hand over to our presenters, who are Alison Seddon and Claire Comfort from the Made of Money project. And Made of Money supports people in London and beyond to improve their quality of life by learning skills, tools, and ideas to manage their money. So before I hand over, just one point that I want to make. We will be doing questions at specific points during the presentation. So if you do have any questions as we're going through anything, please do pop them in the chat, and then Carrie and Alison can pick them up then when they come to the natural pauses in between the sections. So Alison and Carrie, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Lucille. I'm Carrie Comfort from the Made of Money project at QSA.
And I'm Alison Seddon, the project development worker for Made of Money.
It's really nice to have people with us this morning. Thank you for coming. The focus of today's session is supporting people to plan their money for independent living. We're going to be drawing on a resource which is from a very large piece of learning that we've done with adults supporting young people in care, which we're really excited to share with you. The project that we'll be referencing was called Building the Money Springboard, how to provide money learning at the moments young people need it. And it started with a large piece of research into the learning needs, and then involved producing a large suite of resources to support gentle, supportive money learning that felt simple for practitioners and foster carers to deliver, many of whom didn't consider themselves to be money guidance practitioners. The resources that we'll reference today were co-produced with staff, foster carers and young people from St Christopher's Fellowship. And this work was funded by the Money and Pension Service. We can share a link for that afterwards if you'd like to find out more. All the resources are free and available online. But while doing this work, we were really continually reminded that every time something came up was relevant for young people in our work with adults and parents and other people thinking about money on a day-to-day basis, we were just reminded how relevant all these things were for them too. And particularly with this session today about planning money through a transition, we've been really interested to get to a point where we could share this with a wider body of practitioners who are working with adults in this field. So we're really looking out for the applicability, and in the same way that you'll probably be listening in the session, we will actually also be listening really carefully to what you're saying as well and what you're bringing. So we hope you'll see this as us extending an invitation to you to look with us at how this work can apply, and these tools can apply to adults in wider money guidance and learning. So please do ask questions, please do share your thoughts in the survey at the end and in various opportunities towards the end of the session as well. We're really interested to know what you think. The resource that we'll share is quite a simple toolkit that's designed very specifically for supporting care experienced young people to make that shift into independent living. We know that for lots of young people leaving care, that can be a really difficult transition. There's a lot of evidence around that, which I won't go into, but if you particularly want a couple of things to follow up, let us know and we'll share something afterwards. But we imagine that this may well be the case for a lot of the clients you're working with as well, that it doesn't feel a simple transition, it does feel complicated. And we know that there's a lot, there are a lot of things that can sort of go, can come adrift with it. But we also know that the rewards of getting it right are actually really big, really substantial potentially. So, the toolkit that we're sharing is designed to be used by a practitioner and a young person in this case together, but a practitioner and a client together. and it is the language throughout. You'll come across things where we're talking about young people, where perhaps we would use the word client if we were thinking about it in your setting as well. So do bear with us if you find us talking about young people a lot. I'm going to quickly share my screen because there are a couple of things that we would like just sort of draw your attention to. The toolkit that we'll share involves some very practical tools to create a budget, and they are very simple. We know that they may be simpler than other tools that you would encounter, and that may not suit everybody in every situation. But for someone who's feeling very overwhelmed, that also could be a very useful tool. So this is one of the elements we're really interested to hear from you on. Secondly, yay, there it is. Secondly, the task of helping someone to develop that sort of positive vision of their future is central to this approach. The budget can then be geared around helping them move towards that sort of positive picture of their future, and gives a reason to stick to a budget. But obviously a positive sort of picture of what a positive version of your future might look like is going to mean really different things to different people as well. But we'll come back to that. And finally, this is presented and written with a very hopeful tone, and we know that there was a very specific reason for that, because as a co-produced resource, young people told us very clearly that they wanted the resources and the conversation around sort of what their lives might be. They wanted that hopeful tone. That was really important. But we also know that, you know, even for young people in care, that isn't the right approach necessarily for everyone. Some young people did need a positive sort of version of their future to start a bit smaller. So sort of looking at sort of a kind of slightly smaller sense of what that might involve. Sense perhaps of what might make it the next situation feel okay for me. It isn't always the sort of very ambitious changes. And that, you know, there may be parallels with your clients, and I think that's something we're thinking about as well. So I'm going to stop the screen share, and I'm going to hand over to Alison, who's going to talk us through the session structure a little.
Yeah, hi everyone. So let's have a look at what we're going to look at today. I'll show my screen. Here's our agenda. So the first part is that we're going to go through how we use this budgeting tool with young people in that context. And then we're going to share the tools with you in as much of a practical way as we can. So we'll get familiar with the resource. Then in the second half, we're not going to, when we did it with young people, we practiced with a case study. But what we'll do with you is just think about how it might apply to your context in a spirit of curiosity from our side as much as anything else. There'll be opportunities for questions throughout, and we'll have some reflections before we close. Here's what we hope you'll have by the end of the session. So we've got some different budget examples, and these show how financial responsibilities can change when you go through a transition. So we're sort of sharing an idea around visual representation there. We've got an interactive budget planner, which we'll show you. There's a set of moving in tips, which can be useful in the context of transition. And we've got a glossary as well. And the skills and knowledge we hope you go away with is that you've understood how to use the resources and you've applied the resources to your practice. So I'll just stop the share, because the next thing we'll do is think about a group agreement. So if you've got any ideas about how you think we should work together as a group to make this session go really well, just put them in the chat, and I've got a slide as well. I'll pick up anything that we haven't got in the chat. So what do you think would help us make this a really useful group session? Yeah, thank you, Lucille. Kicking it off. Be respectful of others. Thank you, Lucille. That is important, and that obviously involves allowing people to speak if they want to. Trying to contribute. Thank you, Katie. Yeah, that's really useful for us. we really appreciate the sort of to and fro that you get in a group. It can be quite hard in a big group that feels a bit webinar-y, can't it? But we really, really do value your contributions. Yeah, confidentiality. Thank you, Dan. So not sharing personal details. And when I look at the slide in a minute, we'll break that confidentiality down a little bit as well. Interactive and fun. I really hope so, Michelle. That's definitely the intention. Anything else? Okay, I'll keep an eye on the chat and I'll just share the screen again. Thank you. Make it fun and everyone will join in. That sounds like a challenge, Anne. We'll do our very best on that one. Thank you. So let's say, yeah, I hope we do make it fun. So our group agreement here, listening, one person speaking at a time, making space for others, and we'll move things on. So if you notice we're being a bit muscular with that, it's only to make sure we all get a chance to share in those moments when we can. Speaking respectfully, yes, about people out inside and outside the room. Yeah, confidentiality in the session. We really want you to share the learning, but we won't share names or identify people through their details in the session. And then outside the session, we'll share the knowledge, but not people's details or stories. And those details and stories, they really enrich the learning, don't they? But let's make sure we keep them in the room. All right. So I think that covers everything in the group agreement. Anything that I've missed, anyone that we think should go in? And just to clarify that Lucille's already said this, we're recording it and we'll turn the recording off when you go into the breakout rooms and then bring it back on when you come back. But you'll know because that's what Zoom always tells you, doesn't it? Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to hand back to Carrie.
Lovely. Thanks, Alison. I think I mentioned a couple of minutes earlier that we've got a diversity of audience. It's been really nice to see bits in the chat, but we thought it would be worth spending a moment thinking about who is here. Obviously, we're too big for a group for a sort of introductory go-round, but we thought it might be useful to think a little bit about which are the different settings that are represented in the room. And we want to do that because independent living is a term that can be perhaps associated more with some sectors than with others. And we thought it was quite helpful to be aware that when we think about living independently, we're potentially talking about a really wide range of situations. Obviously, our research is focused on care experienced young people transitioning out of a group home environment or a foster placement, but we thought hearing a bit more about the sectors that you work in and the ways in which people are transitioning to independent living could work that up a little. So I'm going to invite everybody to share the setting they work in the group chat, or do feel free to put your indicate with the raised hand function, or even wave if you've got your camera on, and I'll see if I can see you, and if you want to speak it into the group. So I can already see, thank you, Lucy, a university setting. So people coming away, and again, that first living independently experience. So that's really interesting. That will also be people who are, many of whom are sort of doing that in sort of late teenage years. Lovely. Any other settings, ways in which people will be moving into independent living? Thanks. Yes, people who are currently in home office managed accommodation as asylum seekers moving into independent living as well. Thank you. That's another application. Lovely. And people from food bank and pantries who may be encountering a range of people in different situations as well. Thank you. And yes, somebody at Age UK, it'd be lovely to hear more about sort of that version. When we were talking about this, we were thinking about there might be people who were perhaps moving from a home of their own into sort of a sheltered accommodation, or potentially potentially even staying in their own accommodation, but after a bereavement or a divorce, perhaps sort of having a very different experience of that independence as well. Young people moving into first homes and needing to manage the finances completely. Noticing there's quite a bit young people moving into independent living, care experienced young people and refugees. Thank you for raising that as well. Yeah, and resettlement. Yes, as well, people escaping violence or abuse who'll be moving into a very different setting. And of course, sort of financial control and abuse can sort of have, be part of this conversation as well for some people. Thank you. And temporary accommodation, move on. Former offenders, yep, housing advice. So yeah, lots of time. Yes, people living alone for the first time after a relationship breakdown. Thank you. I can see that there's a sort of broad sort of scope here, and young parents as well. Thank you. That's also another group of people who may be in this situation. I think there are several, we'd sort of come up with quite a long list of people as well. Every time I sit down with this list, I see another group of people who could be there as well. Yeah, Alison's nodding. You felt the same. And I think so we'd sort of notice as well, potentially that somebody could be coming out of hospital, and if they've had quite a change in their abilities, then their experience of living independently may be very different, and it may be after a very long hospital stay. Yeah, and also noting people with learning difficulties who perhaps have had one experience of accommodation with a particular type of support, and it may be quite different as well. Lovely. Well, thank you everyone for just sort of giving us a bit of the context here. It's really useful to know the situations in which people may be working with. We'll be referring to your clients throughout the session, so it's quite useful to have a sense of, where those set clients might be and what kind of transitions they might be making. I'm going to build on this thinking with a short exercise, and it's a slightly different gear, shift into a slightly different gear. We're going to ask you to imagine that you've entered a competition and you've won a holiday. So what we'd like you to do is to just start thinking about what are the things you would need to know to help you prepare for your holiday. We're going to, if you want to, do put a hand up and speak into the group, or equally you can answer in the chat as well. Where am I going? Great question. Yep, I think that would be quite high on many of our lists, wouldn't it? But obviously, in the nature of a competition, you might enter it and you might not hear something for a very long time. Yeah, how long for? What will the weather be like? How long will I be away? Yup, food and drink. Yes, is there a passport needed? But we're getting some really important questions there. What's included? Yes, who traveling with, group or solo? Self-catering on price per person. Yeah, all of these things. Activities. Do I need money? Yes. What's the terrain and how are we traveling there? So we've got loads of really practical questions. Yeah, good. Lots. What to pack? Language. Yeah, this is building up. If we get answers to these questions, we'll be building up a really nice detailed sort of picture of what we're going to be doing. If vaccinations, travel insurance, see, lots of things to think about with a holiday. And so we're starting to build up this picture of what are the things that we might need to think about, and trying to put in place pieces of information that can guide us. I'm going to ask us to think about, oh yes, well, Anne, I think that's a really lovely segue sort of question there. You've asked who will look after my pets and my or an elderly relative, etc. Exactly. And I was going to ask, how would our answers change if we were starting to think about what do you need to know to make it a good holiday for you, particularly? Just to think about if it was going to be a good experience for me. We've got lots of things here that are about stopping the holiday being a disaster, making it work on a sort of really practical level. Would we think about anything differently if we were thinking about what makes it work for me? Can I take a friend? That's a really good one. Yeah. And equally, who will be thinking about the people at home? Because that's it's something that the holiday may not go differently depending on what the results are, but your experience of the holiday is going to be really different if you're feeling confident that the people and the animals that you care about at home are going to be taken care of, compared to whether you sort of think, you know, oh, will that be all right? Are they okay? Yet what experiences will be there? You know, if you're someone who likes doing a lot and there isn't anything lined up, or you had to sign up in advance, that could really affect your enjoyment of it. Yeah, will the people I meet be fun? Do you get to schedule your own time? That's a really big one. Yeah. Is it a place I'd actually like to visit? That's another question too, isn't it? Because if not, you might want to kind of think about, well, would I do some other planning in advance to make that easier? Yeah, exactly. And doesn't break your budget as well. That's an important one to think about, isn't it? I mean, we thought of really basic things like, you know, if you're someone who, or for those of us, I can own this, who like a nice cup of tea, you know, is there going to be an opportunity to get a cup of tea? And if not, perhaps you might even want to bring tea bags, you know, little adjustments, the things that are important to us. And a departure point, yes. Sort of, is it going to be convenient or awkward? Are you going to have to get up at, you know, 3:30 in the morning to travel 2.5 hours to, you know, Heathrow or Luton or Manchester, or, you know, all of these things are things that, you know, affect our experience of it. So I think we just wanted to think about this and to kind of to notice those two types of responses. In one sense, we've got those really practical responses, and in another, you know, that help us build up a picture of what we're going to be dealing with and what the basics, what the building blocks of the holiday are. And then we've got those kind of the other layer of questions, just thinking about what actually makes this work for me, what will make this a good experience for me. And those will be different for different people. You know, the building blocks questions might be quite similar for different people, but actually for you, you know, the questions about making it a good experience that's tailored to what you need. For some people, that's going to mean having access to a lot of books. For some people, it's going to mean really different things, or perhaps having a dietary need accommodated. Lots of things. And the reason we've started this session on budgeting for a transition by thinking about holidays is because with as with the transition into a different living situation, holidays also involve an element of preparing for the unknown. You need to think into the future a little bit and think and to try and envisage a situation that hasn't happened yet. We don't know exactly what daily life will be like on holiday. And when we're preparing for a transition, we don't know exactly what daily life will be like after that transition as well, quite possibly. And those things can be quite hard, and they can be quite hard when you're preparing a budget, because it is quite different perhaps to preparing a normal budget with somebody in a sort of stationary situation. You know, things aren't necessarily changing, so there's a lot that's known about the situation. You know, we're having to kind of think into things, and there are two sorts of things that I think it's useful to think about helping, and one is those filling in the gaps questions. Getting the basic information, and in a sort of to move it into the transition about the budgetary transition area, we would perhaps be thinking that clients would be supported by knowing what bills we need to pay, how much is my council tax, what will my take-home pay be, areas like that. Whereas there are also that kind of in the same way that we thought about what a holiday might need to be like for us to have a positive experience of it, that thinking can also support preparing for a transition in terms of sort of planning our money, but also in terms of perhaps supporting us to feel less anxious about the transition as well. Those kinds of thinking, what might things need to be like to work for me? So I think we've started that thinking, we've perhaps opened up the thinking about not just sort of making a budget with somebody, but making a budget with someone who's at a point of change and they're having to make a budget for a situation they don't yet know in detail. And that feels like a nice, perhaps a good point to start looking at the resource. So I'm going to hand over to Alison, who's going to start taking us through the resource.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. We've already touched on just the idea that you'll be very familiar with as practitioners yourselves, that there's things that you can do as you prepare to look at a budget with a person. Just as we started thinking about that holiday, what are the gaps in my knowledge that I need to fill as a practitioner when you're working with your client? You can start to fill in or anticipate how you might fill in some of those gaps, like working out what their income might be, things like service charge or typical bills in a similar setting to the one they're going into. We also know that it's not always possible to fill in all the gaps for your client before they move, partly because you might reach out to colleagues and so on, and you use your own knowledge bank, of course, but all the information that may not be there. And we also acknowledge that for some of your clients, it's hard for them to get hold of all the information that you might want them to share. And they may not feel comfortable sharing it with you. So we acknowledge that you're just going to try and fill in the gaps you can before you start with the budget. Bearing in mind the budget that we're going to share with you, we did create with practitioners in mind who weren't necessarily money guiders. We also acknowledge that there is some discomfort sometimes for a client or a young person in starting to think about budgeting for all sorts of reasons. And when we were working with young people, there are a couple of things that we found helped this process. And it'd be interesting to know if those work also for you. So one of the things we found when working on the original project, that if you look at the resource together with the young person, that can feel a lot less overwhelming than leaving them with it to go through themselves. And also the toolkit that we've created is not a resource that needs to be done in one go. And if you have the luxury of this, I know you don't all, but if you do have the luxury of being able to look at it for as long as feels tolerable, then leave it and come back, you can do that with this toolkit. Okay, so let me share the screen and we'll look at the resource and you can kind of get your eyes on what we're talking about. Oh, hang on, I've got so many things up now. Let me try this one. I hope this is the right one. Yes, it is. Okay, can you all see that, everyone? Thanks for your patience there. I'll just scoot up to the top. So you can see that we start with a letter to the young people. That's quite specific to this resource. So you're welcome to have a look at the resource and read that letter if that would be useful for you in your practice. We started off the resource with just putting some simple reasons as to why someone might want to plan their money. It's quite hard to invite somebody to do something without giving them a rationale. The reasons that we chose to share in this resource were reasons we thought might land with young people about to leave care. So one of the three reasons that we chose are people plan their money because they like to know they'll have money when they need it. They can enjoy spending it because they know how much they've got to spend, and because it helps them feel calmer about money. So those are the reasons that we chose to sort of put this exercise into context that might speak to young people. Now, as we go through this resource, what we really want to share with you is this concept that as you transition in your life from one place to the next, and particularly when there's a financial transition involved, the responsibility you have over the money in your life changes. So for a young person who's still living with foster parents or living in a children's home, they may not have much responsibility over their finances. But as they move into independent living, that responsibility will change until they have much more of it. And we've got the resource here provides a visual way of understanding that we found was useful to share with young people. Certainly that's the feedback that we've got. So we've got a series of pie charts. So I'll talk you through the pie charts we created for the young people we worked with. And we'll be really curious to see how that might translate into your setting. Okay, so the first one is for a child who's looked after. This is for someone who's 15 years old. They're still in care. So you can see with this very simple pie chart, the blue, this is the expenses that exist, but which they're not responsible for paying. So things like mortgage, gas bills, council tax, water, all those things. their foster parents or the children's home will be paying for that. But they will have some financial responsibilities depending on what their foster parents or the home wants them to have, things like travel or personal care clothes, going out, school supplies, and their phone. So they've only got this very small sort of pink segment to their pie. And if we move on to the next stage, so for young people, this transition is often to go into semi-independent living. So the next budget we had was a case study for a person who's moving into semi-independent living and also studying. So in this instance, we created a little sample income. So it's got some universal credit, a travel allowance, and their monthly bursary for their learning and their total. And then their pie, as you can see, it's slightly different. The pink bit that they're responsible for has got bigger because they have more responsibility. But they can still see that these expenses, even though they aren't paying for them, they still exist. It's not like they can not think about them. They're real and somebody has to pay for them. And in this example, for a young person in semi-independent living, usually their rent in their service charge covers all of these bills. You can see covers things like council tax, water, home insurance, and you might find that that's similar for the clients in sort of in between settings as they're going from one setting to another. This may apply to them as well. The sort of expenses we've got here speak to a young person's life. You might frame that differently depending on what's going on in the person that you're working with's lives. We now have an independent budget, so a budget for someone who's living independently and working. So that a hopeful scenario. We've added in here their pay. We also added in the all-important employer deductions so that when that young person gets their paycheck, they don't get a horrible shock. Wait a minute, I thought I was getting X amount per month, but some of it's been taken away. How did that happen? So to try and bring that to life before they meet that situation. So their pay, their deductions, and their take-home pay. And this individual in this case study gets some universal credit as well. And then we go on to their pie, and you can see they've got full financial responsibility for all of their outgoings. And we have the same idea that the different things they spend money on take up a certain amount of the pie, typical with a pie chart. Again, we've got a sort of example budget that covers the sorts of things young people might find relevant and interesting to them. It's not going to be the same for all young people, but for the case study we use, this felt right for this particular person. So the sorts of things that are important to them, having gifts, spending a lot of time on their appearance, having a gym membership, this kind of thing. We also created a fourth budget, which again is in a pie chart form, to show a slightly different reality for living independently, and that's someone on benefits. We've got, again, their income and a total and a breakdown on a pie. This pie shows a different picture, and it's really important that people can see that, young people can see that before they go into it, so they have a sense of what they're going to need to manage. You can see, as we're all very familiar with, how much of a budget rent takes, and then they've got less to spend on their personal expenditure. So those are the example budgets using pies to illustrate this. I'll stop the share. If you have any questions, please ask them now, put your hand up or pop them in the chat if you've got any questions about how that works. Just checking to see if anyone's got their hands up, or I don't see any hands at the moment. So any questions to help get sort of clarify anything I went through there? Was pretty rapid, probably not that unfamiliar to you. Yeah, Melanie, what we did in terms of our the figures that we used, we did the best information we could based on the case studies we had in mind that were correct at time of going to press. So they'll certainly I've picked up, Anne, that you want to say something, and I'll come to you in a minute. Probably the accuracy of that is going to change. So we did as best we could use set figures based on the context that we invented, as it were. Thanks, Dan. Yeah. So Anne, you had a question. What was your question? Do you want to come off mute and say it? Yeah, great.
Yeah, I was just looking for it there. Right, so I've got 2 young clients that have been brought up in care, and your budget's correct, but it's very simple, but life isn't like that for my clients. They've came out of care, and
Yeah.
however they've got there, they wouldn't come to me because I'm a debt advisor at Citizens Advice. So they've came to me with their caseworkers or their support workers for leaving care. And straight away when they've come out of care, they've been given 2-bedroom properties. So straight away there's a bedroom tax.
Yeah.
And they've ended up in debt because they don't have enough money to pay their gas and electric. They don't have enough money to buy clothes. They don't have enough money to go out.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think that's a really important point, Anne.
Yeah.
That
So where your budget is right in an ideal world, I don't think those young people have ever lived in an ideal world. I think life's very, very tough for them. And
yeah. Can I pick up on that, Anne? That context that you're describing, is that okay?
Yes, yes.
You're absolutely right that the world that young people come into is very complex, and the budgets and the pie charts that I showed you are part of a set of learning tools that practitioners can use to assist the young person before they get into the position where things are so complex they cannot manage. And we also absolutely acknowledge that a lot of the clients you work with are in deficit budget, and then whatever you do with your pie chart, if you don't have enough money, it makes no sense, does it? And we absolutely reflect that. So I suppose the important thing to say about the resources is that they're preparatory resources, about making sure the young person is ready at the point when they leave, rather than, I mean, that's the whole reason why the Money Springboard started, is to make sure that young people got the money learning before this moment arrived. Carrie, you have your hand up. You wanted to pick up?
Yeah.
Thanks. Yes, and I would just add as well that you know, it's one of, as we go through, you'll see that this is quite an easy budget to keep redoing. And I think one of the points that we often sort of share is that, you know, you can use, as Alison said, this is a sort of preparatory tool in this part. So it's about thinking, what are the things that I'm going to need to pick up, but also just that, you know, it will very likely be a budget that gets redone, and potentially redone quite a lot of times. You know, we might well revisit that. You know, it's that. I think it's sort of aimed at giving the ability to sort of to plan in different situations, because as soon as you say, as soon as people make the move, there's a change that's happened and the situation is slightly different already.
Thank you, Carrie. I'll just pick up a couple of points. Angela, if you found there was a budget that worked with a young person and focus on that, you could, and talk through all the possibilities. I think the point with the pie charts is they're illustrative of the fact that they will move from not having full financial responsibility to having full financial responsibility, and that they have a choice on how they spend the money that they have. Carrie's going to talk through a budget tool with you, which looks at those sort of flexibilities. And it might be that the context that you work in, all we can share here is that a visual representation may be useful for you, but you might need to create your own one that reflects your client's experiences. And Susanna, thank you, Angela, I'm glad that's worked. Susanna, yeah, it's interesting that with the different expenses mixed up, and I think we'll pick that up in a moment when Carrie talks through the budget planner. We do look at what you need to spend and what your discretionary spend is. But when we looked at this in the round, we just found that the reason for this visual was to help them see that there's stuff they are responsible for when they're fully independent, but they haven't been responsible for it before. And that discussion about what is and isn't necessary and what is discretionary happens elsewhere along the way. Does that cover it, do you think, Carrie, that point? Yeah, thank you, Carrie. All right. Thank you, Susanna. Great. Any other questions? Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into some breakout rooms. The question we're going to ask is, well, hang on, let me just position that a bit. We've had quite a big discussion there. Okay, so I think we've already discussed that the financial transition your clients go through won't be exactly the same as the young people that we've designed this for. But we wondered if it's still useful for you to illustrate this similar experience. So someone moving from street homeless to sheltered accommodation to independent living, that might be a similar trajectory, just the same as somebody who's been in an abusive relationship with little access to money, being in a shelter to being in their own place. And we acknowledge the transition. You'll have had a lot of experience possibly of moving people through this transition. But obviously for each individual, it's a new, bewildering, quite painful experience. And having a visual guide could be a useful way for them to think about what that change is going to look like without it being totally overwhelming. Okay, so breakout rooms. Lucille's going to organise those. Yeah, they are great questions. Thank you, everyone. And the question we have is, what groups do you work with who you think might find this visual approach helpful? Thanks, Lucille. The question's in the chat. So not like an exact replica of these pie charts, but what groups do you work with you think this might map on this idea that the responsibilities change and we can represent it visually? Okay, when the room's open, click on a room if you'd like to. You don't have to go into the breakout room. If you want to stay in here, you can. But please, if you'd like to chat about it with other people, please do. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. As Alison said, if you don't want to go into the breakout room, that's absolutely fine. Just ignore the prompt that appears on your screen. If you find yourself in a room by yourself, please don't worry, because I'm going to be in the background making sure that nobody's in a room by themselves, but it's just going to take me a minute or two just to move people around. So I'm going to open up the rooms now. We'll have 7 minutes. The question is in the chat for you, and I'm going to open up the room. So you'll get a notification. So if you click the notification that appears, and then, hold on. No, that didn't do it. So let me try that again. Let's come out of that. Zoom has changed its interface, so it's very confusing. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. So I'm going to open up the rooms now, and you'll get a notification that appears on your screen. As I said, if you find yourself in a room by yourself, don't worry. I'm going to be maneuvering in the background and moving people around. And if you don't want to join for any reason, then that's absolutely fine.
In the chat about what you... Thank you, Lucille. I'll start that again, so I got it on the recording. It'd be great to hear just voices in the room or any comments in the chat. Anything that you talked about in the breakout rooms that you think would be interesting to share or you'd like to share with others. It'd be really lovely to hear and read some of that. Yeah, Angela.
Hi. So in our room between the three of us, I think we kind of covered nearly all, well, just lots and lots of different groups. And I don't think we found a group where it wouldn't be helpful for between, you know, children, like showing them what's going to come in adulthood. And we talked about prison leavers on custodial sentences. We talked about people who had, so coming out of financial abuse, coming out of bereavement, and just for everybody, that visual the visual thing, we thought that could help everybody, all the different groups that we use. And I'd said as well that I think that idea, because I've done budgeting before and done it with, you know, pie charts, but never thought of adding that thing of what was always paid before, but you didn't realize was getting paid, so that it's always been there. It's not something that's getting added as such, so that it's always been in that pie chart. We thought that was quite helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And just because the experiences that young people in care have, often they have no awareness that those bills exist. Thanks, Angela. Victoria, you have your hand up. Oh, you're doing a thumbs up. Sorry. I've got my arrow on top there. Thanks, Angela. Anything else? Anything else anyone would like to say? Richard.
Yeah, it was just the pie chart seems to bring everything out of chaos, because a lot of people that we work with, for one reason or other, either coming out of debt or changing the situation, they're in a bit of chaos. And sometimes it's that chaos that prevents them from being able to budget. But that just puts it on a piece of paper. You can see it all in one sheet, and you think, oh, it's organized. I think I can tackle that. So I thought that was very good.
Yeah, it's almost like you can hold on to the picture,
Yeah.
whereas before it just feels like you're just skittering away from trying to get your hands on what's happening to you. Thank you, Richard.
A lot of the people I work with actually don't open letters, and so
Yeah.
they get totally confused. Yeah. So,
Yeah, it's just too much, isn't it?
yeah.
Thank you, Richard. Any other comments? I'm just going to skip over to the other page. Okay. I think, according to our timetable, we're ready for a break, I think. So thanks, everyone. It's been really lovely to hear your voices and the comments in the chat. And we're going to take 10 minutes for the break, aren't we? So that means we'll be back at 11:39. But Lucille's going to she's going to do her wizard timer. You're going to put a timer up for us to follow. So we'll see you back here in 10 minutes.
Perfect. Lovely. So for the benefit of the recording, welcome back, everybody. And we're smiling because we just had a very lovely sound effect to remind us that our break is finished. We've reached, we're going to go back into the budget resource and the budget toolkit at the moment. This is, and we're at the point now of sort of starting to make the actual budget with a client, or in this case, with a young person. And we've talked about the toolkit being a thing to do together. And it's quite it's a toolkit that's designed to start with the practitioner and the client, or the young person in this case, very much engaging in the process together, talking through, looking at things. And this is the point at where it starts to transition over to being the document of the young person. And so to put it in Academy Awards terms, this is where your role goes from co-star to best supporting actor or actress. It's where you're really kind of letting the client come forward and sort of take more of a center stage and own the budget a bit more. But that can be a really hard thing to do. So you've definitely still got a role in enabling that and supporting it. And that's sort of this toolkit's very much designed to look like that. And a large part of that role is asking questions, gently making suggestions, and helping young people to kind of pull out, or your clients to pull out, what they want their life to be like after this transition. As we've mentioned, this toolkit's created very much for young people. So by definition, they're early on in their lives. Many of your clients will be older, and some of them may be significantly older. But central to supporting this budget approach is thinking about what they might like their life to be like. So the budget and the decisions about how they use their money can support that. The things we want from life may be different as we age, but most of us still do have things we want from our lives, often at any age. And we may become more set in our ways, and maintaining some of those habits may be, much more important to us as well. So that in itself may be something that we want from our lives. So even if clients wouldn't use language, which many of them might not, like, what do you want your life to be like? We'd flag that many of our clients will still have preferences, and those preferences may be quite strongly and dearly held. So the reason we've emphasized the choice and this sort of very choice-based approach is because we know it can be really hard to stick to a budget. Well, this is one of the reasons. And if you can see the budget leading to things you want, that can be a significant incentive to following it. It can give dignity, and it can give empowerment. But ultimately, who wants to follow a budget that will fund a life that you don't want to live? And I think that's something that, for many of us, it needs to contain the potential for fun and pleasure, whatever that looks like to us, and it will be different. But we would also acknowledge that with clients who are sort of much nearer to deficit budgets, that can feel a really big ask, and we will come back to that. And the potential for impact is smaller. So actually, the sort of looking at where is the choice in your spending, I think in a way can become even more important. come back to some of that. I'm going to pick up exactly where Alison left off in the toolkit. So I'm just going to share my screen. Lovely. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
If anybody's struggling to see or needs it to be a little bit larger, please do let me know. And I might ask Alison to flag it verbally if I miss it in the chat while I'm presenting. So we've started off with really basic steps for making a budget, which will be, because this is a toolkit designed for people who aren't money guidance practitioners. So for many of you, you will be very familiar with this. Work out what you have coming in, work out what you need to spend each month, and save something, ideally. So I think one of the things that I would say just here is that you'll all be really familiar, I think, with that sort of pattern, as I think came up earlier in the chat, in a really good point, about distinguishing between what we want and what we need. And, you know, when we budget, we're very, you know, by far the most usual thing is to start with what are the things you really need before getting around to the things you want. I think what we've said here is that we've acknowledged that for some people that can feel a really hard way to begin, and just to sort of introduce the possibility that if you have a client who's really struggling to become motivated in thinking about a budget, who you're really struggling to engage with it, sometimes an easier way in can be to think of, you know, things that they might want, things they might want their life to be like, to help get the thoughts flowing. And it doesn't mean that you don't, that there isn't clarity that comes in about what are the things you need to prioritize paying, but just in terms of starting to get to think, you know, that bit where you have the paper and you're thinking about what are the things that go down, what are the things we need to put in here. If that feels an easier way to get that flowing, just to introduce that possibility. We've also flagged 2 little budgeting tips, which I don't think will be news, or I think you'll probably all be quite familiar with. The idea of a budget needs to have some possibility of treats, and also to prepare for surprises. But obviously for younger people who don't have experience of living at home, and bear in mind young people in care may very well not have experience of living in a household with the person who makes the decisions for what to pay, and that may be different for your clients, but in some situations it might not too. And that, you know, it's that thing that came up just before the break of the things that, you know, you may be quite familiar as a practitioner with the transition that your client is taking, and they may not be as they may well not be familiar with that. So I'm going to move us on, and I'll point, for anyone who's thinking of slightly different budgets, I would point out we've got links to 2 other budget templates there. For there's a great, very simple NatWest one for, you know, trialing out really simple budgets if people need help, and there's a really good step change one as well for people who need something a bit more complex. But what we've got here is just what we would start. It's the step 1, put in the things that we get regularly from different sources. And I'm sure lots of you can think of things. There may be benefits, there may be earnings. I think there'll be a higher awareness of budgeting techniques in this group, so I won't go into too much detail. Tell me if I'm wrong. But yeah, obviously we'll be looking at putting in things that are kind of predictable and regular income rather than, say, gifts. So that's a sort of fairly simple start. Where also you may notice that there's an interactive budget. We will come back to that and we will do that separately, but we'll just talk through the process in the toolkit. And then we've got the costs. And so we've got what, you know, again, it's sort of, we've got a kind of soft prompt for thinking of the essentials here, which are the things that people will need to pay. And then we move through to the things which are not essential. Some of your clients won't want or need all of those things, and there will be other things that they may well want or need. You know, I think picking up Anne's point, it is very different. There's room to add some more things, but please keep going. Because again, it is very personal and will depend a lot on situations. We've got here in terms of service charge, that's why we've got, do I pay for this directly? Because it's helping people to make the links that there are a number of things they may not be used to paying, and again, may not even be aware need to be paid. And at the moment, it's not that they're not being paid for, but if they pay a service charge, they'll be paying it through that. So it helps people get used to the idea of, actually, I am paying for that. But it doesn't look like it doesn't look like me paying it directly at the moment. But if people then move into perhaps if they're sort of moving from a semi-independent to an independent living situation, that can help prepare the ground for that a bit too. So we can put in lots of amounts, and we've also given a prompt for the usual but not 100% exemption for council tax for care leavers, but that won't be relevant to our clients. Does anybody have, I'm just going to pause us and ask if anybody, well, before I go through the rest of the sections, does anybody have any questions about the budgeting? And I just want to check in whether that feels straightforward. Perhaps I might ask people to hit their reaction buttons if they have them. There's a little, most of us will see it in the 3 little dots at the bottom. There's a, yeah, reactions, lovely, thank you. I'm seeing lots of thumbs up, that's good, that sounds about right. So if anybody has any questions, pop them in the chat. Oh, I'm seeing lots of thumbs up floating up a screen, that's very exciting as well. And I probably like that out of all proportion, but it's great. Lovely, in which case let's go on with the next part, if we're all together with that. We're going to now look at the moving in budget, and the reason this is here because for most young people in care there will be a budget at a point of moving out to spend on equipping a place and so on. Not everybody who's moving into independent living may have a similar thing, but for many people there will be some source of funding around that, whether it's a grant or a DWP loan or different things there. And I think we just wanted to kind of ask a few questions to help that move from being a list of things you need to buy into a tool that can actually help you support your well-being, potentially your mental health, and obviously planning your money by thinking about sort of what makes your home your own, what makes your home feel like a home. So there are some sort of really practical questions in there, but there are also some about how people want to live there, and some sort of slightly life questions, or what do you want from the next couple of months might be a gentler way to say that. This is also quite a nice place to bring in the idea that managing money doesn't always mean just spending the absolute minimum you can. Sometimes it may be worth spending a little bit more. And actually, one of the really useful skills in managing your money is being able to think about where are the places what are the things that matter more to you to spend money on. So we've got an example that comes up quite a lot about buying a duvet cover, and clients might have the option of spending, say, £10 on a duvet cover, which is in a colour they don't particularly like, or has a pattern that they don't particularly like. And for some people, that will be the right choice because that's not what's important to them in spending their money. And that's not that's not the thing that's important for them in their home. But for other people, spending a little bit more on a duvet cover that's in a lovely colour or has a pattern is going to make them smile every time they open their bedroom door. And, you know, for some people that may well, you know, spending the few extra pounds on something they like more may be worthwhile. So it's kind of starting to kind of bring in that sort of element of, well, actually, what are the things that it's that prioritizing element of budgets, which I think you will be very familiar with. We've then got a little, this is the toolkit, really moving into being a resource people can take with them and can refer back to if they're not with you. And again, this is us trying to slightly see into the future and thinking, what are the kinds of things that will need to come up? But also doing that, obviously, it's a co-produced resource. So we've done that in conjunction with young people who are making the transition to independent living, and also young people who've made that, as well as the practitioners who work with them. So, there are a range of things just to kind of come back to if you find yourself needing to borrow Lots of us will be hoping people won't, but yeah, just the FCA link. There's one of the things I would draw attention to. I think many of you will know it, but the loan calculator on the Money Saving Expert site, which is really, really simple if you're thinking about taking out borrowing. Obviously, lenders are meant to be clear about the costs, but this is much clearer. So it's a really nice thing where you just put in the amount of money, the time you're paying back, and the interest rate, and it will give you a really clear breakdown of what you'll be paying. And I think that's a really useful thing to just have up your sleeve in case you need it. I think somebody mentioned earlier in the chat about having the terms and conditions and presets information that people often need to give for talking about money, and how for some people that can really make it can be very hard to follow. And I think, you know, that's quite a useful tool if someone's thinking about it, borrowing money, to be able to know about. And it's also flagging that there are DWP loans, and also talking a little bit about loan sharks, because obviously very few loan sharks will be introduced to somebody as a loan shark. They'll seem very friendly, and if you're worried about money, that can feel an incredibly, you know, gentle way to borrow money until you find out that it isn't. And then we've just got a few top tips for the future, flagging the ability to price compare on things like insurance and utilities, flagging the existence of social broadband tariffs. I think with a Money Guiders Expert, people will know about the social broadband tariffs. Can I just come out of the share? Can I ask people to hit the reaction buttons again if you know you're familiar with the social broadband tariffs, which providers are obliged to offer? Yeah, good, some awareness that, yeah, but obviously they do not often publicise them very strongly. So that may well be something that we need to pick up on. Excuse me. I need to plug my laptop in.
Carrie, there's a couple of people who aren't familiar with the broadband.
Thank
tariff.
you. Excuse me for that really rookie mistake. It's usually on my list of things to check before the workshop. So yes, yeah, so the broadband tariffs are things that providers are generally obliged to offer. Most providers do, but not, they don't tend to get publicised, and they tend to be a much cheaper way of getting broadband. So it's really worth, what we might do is put a link to some information around that if we can send that out afterwards, Lucille. But it's a useful thing to know about, because you know you won't get a leaflet telling you that's an option, but if you ask for it you will get the information. So it's just a thing for people to have up their sleeves. I'm going to share the screen again and go back in. Yeah, lovely. And it's got a link to Help to Save scheme as well. Really good government offer for helping people on low incomes to save money, where they match a lot of what you fund or a lot of what you save. And then a couple of links to really useful organisations, again, to have up your sleeve: National Debt Line, Step Change, Turn to Us, in case we run into difficulties. And the final thing we have in the toolkit is a sort of simple glossary just to talk through some basic household money language, and it covers things to do with paying bills, having a bank account, getting paid by a job, sort of really simple things, and also a little bit about managing utilities as well. There's a lot that we pick up by osmosis, and it's really useful sometimes to think about the things that we might not. Lovely, thank you. Alison's put an explainer into for social broadband tariffs. So I'd like to have a check-in at this point to check whether anybody has any questions or any comments or thoughts they'd like to share, or would like me to go and spend a little bit more time with anything in the toolkit. I'm going to give a couple of minutes for that, because I think sometimes online it can take a minute to formulate a question, can't it? It's sort of not quite the same as being in a really small group, the training. But I think I'd also sort of flag again that the things we have in the toolkit are things that, you know, it's a co-produced resource, so they're things that we've had a really strong steer. It's useful to include. And the other point I would make about making a budget, which I'll probably come back to again, is that yeah, I think the saving is very important. There's a prompt for that in the lists. Someone just said, do we emphasize savings? And yeah, there's a prompt for that in the lists. And I think we kind of flag it as well with when we talk about surprises, because actually the way you equip yourself for surprises is you put some aside when you're not having surprises. And then you can, then when something happens, you have that resilience to cope with it. I think Alison once described savings to me as showing up for yourself in the future. And I really love thinking about it in that way. You know, it really is a way that you can do yourself a favour going forwards. And obviously budgets are things that will need to be, things that will need to be often redone and done several times. And we'll come and talk a bit more about that. Yeah, lovely. Okay, so in which case, moving on, you may recall that I skipped over a budgeting tool when we started looking at the budget, and we're going to go back and have a bit more of a look at that. So I'm going to share my screen again, but I am going to share it. So, you know, I'm going to do it this way. So if we go back to our budgeting section, there's a little link here. So we're going to click there. And it's going to take you to a page on our website which hosts a resource. And this is a budget calculator. So there are links back into the resource there, and obviously the resource links to it. And this is designed to be a really,
Sorry, Carrie, we can't see the calculator. We can just still see the PDF.
Yeah, shall I share it, Carrie? Because I'm going to be filling it in.
That would be great. Fabulous. So we start again with the income, and we're going to invite Alison. I'm going to invite Alison to put in some money. So it can earn some money. And again, the figures that we're using are quite nominal. They come out of things we developed for case studies with St. Christopher's, but and at the point of being done, various ones were run through budget calculators and salary calculators and benefit calculators. Thanks for noting. Yeah, those were, but they're not, in a sense, the numbers that go in aren't the sort of important thing for this. It's really just to give you a indicative kind of sense of how this works. So you'll see that the main wages have gone in, and they've populated the total income field there. If we add another source of income, which might be benefits, and something goes in there, as you'll see, it automatically updates to total the income. We could add more, and equally we could use the pink tabs at the end to remove things. So we're giving them a side hustle, which is nice. They're earning £50 a month. We'll do this monthly, but we might take off money as well. So just to give you a sense of how that works. Shall we go down a bit, Alison, and start looking at putting expenses in? So again, we've got the prompt. This echoes the resource in the PDF. So if you want, you can print it and do it on paper, but you can also use this. Nice to have people with us just to acknowledge the message. And as you'll see, we're putting in, it starts with the things that are very much essential and the priority costs that we've got. And then if we sort of go down, I think we've got some of that. That's right. We've got some of those kind of more discretionary spends. Some of the things that we, are able to kind of choose sort of what we do, and they won't all be important. But yeah, savings will be in there as a prompt because that is a really useful thing. And I think it's actually, savings is a really nice place to be able to start to think about mental health and money and make that link for clients who may sort of not make that themselves. That obviously, we talk about we spend a lot of time talking with people about budgets. And one of the reasons that comes up most consistently for making a budget is because you worry less about money. You know you've got money for the things you need to spend on, and you can take that sort of worry away. And saving is another part of that you can make yourself less anxious. And we ask people why they save money, and overwhelmingly people say, actually, I worry less if I've saved money. So it's worth kind of making that link there. And as you'll notice, as Alison's been putting lots of expenses in, and the yellow bar at the bottom, the total expenses, has been calculating them and adding them up, and it's subtracting them from the total income there. So it's telling us the total leftover income. So as people put things in, they can start to see, oh, okay, I'm running low on money. Okay, and then they can adjust. So Alison's just adjusting some of the costs there, and putting those in, and we'll see as she goes down that it starts to adjust at the bottom as well. And I might ask Alison if you'd go a bit further down the calculator as well. And we've got an interactive pie chart. So as Alison's been putting in the expenses, it's been populating the pie chart, and as she changes them, the pie chart will change. So it's this, in a sense, people are making their own personal pie chart that shows exactly what their current budget is spending. It has Alison just very kindly highlighted that leftover field of this is what we've still got unallocated, and so it shows that unallocated money in proportion to the rest. It shows the rent, so you can see, oh, actually, not all of us think when we hear the numbers, not all of us think in quite such proportional terms. So it can be really useful to sort of get a sense of, oh, actually, that's how much of my money it takes. So we can see that as well. And we think, oh yes, we haven't put something in food. And we do, budgets are often, as you'll know, things that you come back to and you jiggle. And this is designed to be something that people can, you can have, if it's useful, take the link, use it with clients, use it as many times as they could like. There's no limit of how many times people can fill it in. At the moment, unfortunately, we don't have the functionality to email budgets. So if you're on a desktop, you may be able to print it or take screenshots. And if we went down a little bit lower, you can see we've got a slightly more condensed list of the income and the expenses that if you're going to screenshot it on a phone or take a photo of it, make it slightly easier to get a sort of condensed picture of that. We'd love to fundraise for that and get that functionality, but we don't have it at the moment. Thank you. Alison, could we come out of screen share and just see if anybody has any questions there? I'm going to move back to gallery view so I can see people. Thanks, Alison. Does anyone have any questions? I see a couple. And the chat.
Holly, you've just come off mute.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. I couldn't see on the income and expenditure when you put in their figures, is that a month? Can you change it to a monthly, weekly? You see what I mean? Can you?
Yeah, at the moment it's monthly. It is set up to be monthly, but I think you just put in, if as long as you're consistent in what you put in, it will show the right amount. Does that make sense?
Although actually you can put in you put in the wages for the time you appeal, and that's for the time that you're thinking of. And if you put in a weekly wage and then put in weekly costs, it would still work in the same way. It shouldn't give you a problem. We could give it a quick go. Thank you, Alison's ahead of me there. One step ahead.
Sorry, I've just noticed it's only one.
We generally use it monthly, but let's have a look. And if we had, if we used it for a smaller amount of money, then the figures would adjust. And we could start to.
My maths isn't up to making these calculations accurate. I just for an example.
Working out quickly. That's fine. It's just that I just noticed that there's no option if you can. if someone wanted to know what it was monthly, or someone wanted to know what it was weekly. I mean, obviously you'd have to manually put that in.
Yeah, I hear you.
Monthly, yeah.
You're asking, sorry, Connie, you're asking, does it convert it for you from a monthly to a this is what per week? No,
No,
it
you
doesn't.
have to do it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Which obviously is a sort of more complicated thing.
Yeah, thank you.
And we will, there's a sort of question as well. Claire, will we be sending a link? Yes, we will be sending a link. So we'll give you the link to the document, but we'll also give you the link separately to the budget calculator. And how does it cope with longer periods like annual holiday, clothes, etc.? I think it's it's very much.
I can pick that one up, Carrie. Within the budget, Richard, there's sections you can fill in to put money aside each month or each week for that particular budget, even if you don't spend it. So, for example, people might not get their hair cut every month, but if they put a little bit towards their hair every month, then when it comes to it in a few months' time, they've got as much as they need. So it's not just the expenditure for each month or what you need to save for each month. There are fields there to put in so that you can populate it and make enough money over the period of time to get your Christmas monies together, if that makes sense. Thanks, Richard.
Was that what you were, was that your question, Richard, or was there have we covered it all? Great, okay. Lovely. Are there any other questions with that? Otherwise, we will move on. Okay. So yeah, I think we've looked at some really practical ways to support people to make a budget. Coming back to that other element of the support, we've sort of already flagged that we would invite you to explore with your clients the sort of area of where are the possibilities for you in this new phase of your life, and how can you use your money to support you to make the most of them. Now, the language you use might differ greatly. That's not going to be language that will resonate for everyone. It may not be language you would use. Many of us, will translate that into other wording. And we would note that actually feels really important, because I think it's important to be sensitive here, because just acknowledging that for many of your clients, as I'm sure you'll be aware, there can be significant pain involved in some of these transitions as well. And for some of your clients, the sort of wide, optimistic, reflective question of what would you like your life to be like will be useful, but not for everyone. And we had a very firm steer from young people when we developed this work that they wanted an approach to be optimistic about their lives and their opportunities. But that won't be the right question for even all young people leaving care. And I'm sure it won't be the right question for all clients. Some people will need to think about what they want in smaller and perhaps more concrete terms. So let's have go at doing that ourselves, I think. So Lucille is going to put a Menti link into the chat, and we're going to go on to Mentimeter briefly and just think about what is an inexpensive object that supports your happiness or your well-being in day-to-day life. I'm going to ask everyone just to think of a small thing or an expensive thing, that's something that supports your happiness in day-to-day life. Yeah, getting nails done, brilliant. And there's a link to a Mentimeter. So what we might do is think if you see in the chat, Lucille has a Menti link there, and she's sharing her screen. If you click on the link, you'll have an opportunity to put something in. Lovely. Getting a couple of responses, and perhaps we can just get a little picture of different things. Music. Yeah, music, you know, you don't have to pay anything at all for it, do you? But it makes such a difference to how we experience our lives. And actually, for someone, an inexpensive thing to listen to music on, maybe.
Childhood pillow.
Oh, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and I think it also ideas of things that, you know, bringing in, you know, your senses. Often the things that we need are very sensory. So for some people, it might be just building in enough in the budget to use a particular brand of laundry powder, because then things will smell right. It can be really being kind. Yep. Absolute Radio. Yep. You know, your favorite radio station is a huge thing. We've got books. And yes, you know, wonderful thing about modern life, you don't necessarily need to pay a lot of money for a book you want. You know, there are lots of ways to get them. Lovely. So I think starting to kind of build up a picture. Thank you, Lucille. I think we've probably had all the responses we're having, so I might come back to the main Zoom call. Thank you, everybody, for putting things in. And we've got coffee cups, dogs, subscriptions as well, gardening. Yeah, absolutely. So lots of things there that don't have to cost a lot of money but can support us. And we're asking this because I know sometimes we can feel a bit uncomfortable encouraging our clients to be satisfied with little things, because we may fear being patronizing. But when we think about what supports us, you know, there are those small things that make us feel secure and happy, and sort of just helping people kind of reflect on what those are, and that wherever they are in the transition, they'll still be able to have their yoga mat, they'll still be able to listen to Absolute Radio, they'll still be able to have their mum's teapot with them. You know, lots of these things can be things that, you know, maybe someone said childhood pillow, they may be things that we bring with us and we keep with us, that have they may be gifts from people, or they might remind us of an experience we've had or of something we've achieved, and just these things that sort of make us smile as we go about our day-to-day life. A good night's sleep, very definitely. I can see that there as well. Lovely. So if we think about and I think of thinking things like a positive version of the future does need to happen on a smaller scale, particularly with your client. I'm thinking back to section 5 of the toolkit and the moving out grant. You know, even things like a DWP loan for essentials in the house can still be that opportunity to make a choice that's about what works for you. And I think that feels like a useful point to go into breakout rooms again. And we're going to give you, Lucille's going to send you a link in a moment. And the question we're going to ask you to think about, which we will pop into the chat, is what kind of questions might I ask to support a client in this process? Oh, thank you, Lucille. You've put that in there too. I just misread the comment from somebody saying they needed to go. Thank you. I'm pleased it's been interesting. But I just misread that as coming from Lucille. And I thought, oh, I was hoping you'd open the breakout rooms.
Please don't go, Lucille.
Yes.
I'm still here. I'm still here. What I'm going to do is that I appreciate that some people have to go and some people can't go in the breakout room. We're going to have the breakout room open for 5 minutes. Same as before, if you find yourself in a room by yourself, please just bear with us. We'll just move you into another room. And if for whatever reason you cannot join a room, then it's fine for you to stay in the main room. So you should get the notification on your screen now.
Thanks, Lucille.
And I put the timer on for the people in the main room as well, just in case you're not able to join the breakout rooms.
Lucille, is it helpful if I move people too, or does that just get in your way?
It's fine. I'm just doing it in the background. Just doing it in the background now. Just so I can make sure that nobody is by themselves. Okay, so it doesn't look like anybody is by themselves.
Welcome back, everyone. People coming back from the breakouts. We're just heading towards the close, but before we get there, I'd love to know, there are a couple of questions that people would like to share either into the group or in the chat. An example of a question you might ask that would work for your clients. Angela, you're off mute, but you might not be because you're going to speak. It just might be because you're off mute.
Oh no, I had forgotten to put myself back on mute, but I suppose, but I can easily say
Okay.
we were finding it quite difficult to not be, well, I was anyway, to be not overthinking about about coming across as judgy or patronizing or whatever. But maybe one question would be trying to find out what their starting point is. So what are they already doing, and what tools do they already have that they might, so we were talking about how different bank accounts have different apps, and some of them show you loads,
Yeah.
like do a lot of this stuff for you already, and some of them don't. So can you find like their bank account app if they're happy, and see what is there already for them to kind of show how much has already been done. That was one thing we'd discussed.
Yeah, finding a good starting point. Yeah, exactly. And in fact, on the powerful question session that's happening with Money Guiders, you can probably pick up some great questions that can help unlock, how do I want my life to be in this future? Yeah, what are your priorities? Great. Thank you, Pauline. And then what do you know? Thank you. I'd love to spend a bit more time talking about this. And there's some great comments in the chat, but because we're running into the final section and we have a poll we'd love you to take. So first of all, thank you very much for joining the session and sharing this work. We really value the work that we've done on the Money Springboard, and we hope that dignity and empowerment are fundamental to the approach that we share today. That's certainly our intention. And we know that you work in a lot of different settings, and the feedback from our original sector has been excellent, and we would really love to get a sense of how relevant this might be to your clients. So here's a poll, and in the poll we'd ask you to tick which of the tools that we shared you think you might use with your clients. So tick as many as you think might be relevant. Did you just tick it in the box, do you, or is that how it works? I hope that will make sense. I might be seeing it slightly differently from everyone else.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Yeah, cool.
Yes.
Oh, here we go. We've got some results coming in. Brilliant. I love it. The interactive budget planner, the glossary. Oh, great. That's fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Oh, wonderful.
It's so useful
thank
as
you.
we're trying to work out how widely to share this and what will be useful for people.
Exactly. It just gets us a sense of what we can use and how it might apply in other contexts. Obviously, we want to share what we've discovered with as many different client groups as we can. Brilliant. Everybody's answered that. Thank you very much. And so then the next thing is just to say again, thank you for coming along. We're trying to enhance the body of knowledge in this field and exploring the potential of our approach, as I said. And if you've got any ideas or applications for the work and you'd like to share that with us, please do email us. I think Lisa's going to put the email in the chat. And we also have a type form for you to give us feedback, which is so important. And if you're interested in the sessions as they stand for young people, we have some training sessions available that you can log on to, and I think the link to those is going to be shared in the chat. So we've got some sessions coming up in autumn. If you just want to do working with young people about money as they make this transition, please come along and join us for those. Thank you very much, Lucille. And I think that's everything I have on my completing bit. Just thank you so much, everyone, for being engaged and all the information you shared with us and all the great questions you asked. Thank you. Thanks, Anne. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone. Please do fill in the evaluation form. Yes, Carrie.
Just flagging that there's a link to the other training events in the chat now. And yes, if you would like to come onto our Made of Money mailing list so that you can learn about other trainings and things that we run, do either indicate in the chat or email to Lucille. There may be an opportunity on the feedback form, but I'm not certain. So just to sort of flag that. And thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for your thoughts.
Thank you so much to Alison and Carrie. Such a really informative session. Thank you so very much. Thank you to everybody for attending. You'll get an email with all of the resources. So you'll get a link to the budgeting tool so that you can use that as well. You'll get a copy of the recording and a copy of the PDF version as well, so that you can access that, as well as the links to the upcoming events with Made of Money and with us as well. So thank you so much for being here. Please don't forget to provide us with your feedback. It's much appreciated. And we hope to see you at another event soon. Take care, everybody. Thank you for coming.